Okay, let's look at making some code. We've had a look at how HTML pages are really just plain text formatted with a series of HTML elements that we write as tags. Um, let's get in and write some tags. Now, usually we find that a web page has gone through a design process, and for our first steps writing HTML, I'm going to use my nature skincare example again. We can see here that the email newsletter that we're going to write in HTML has gone through a process of sketching, designing in Photoshop in this instance, and then finally uh, marking that up with HTML elements. Um, so I sketched it out, put it together in Photoshop, and then I've worked out how I can structure that and then render it in HTML. Just quickly, here's my Photoshop file where I've put together a kind of a pixel perfect 100% version design of the newsletter. And you can see we've got a bunch of different kind of graphic and typographic elements inside or as part of this this design. Up the top, we've got a logo element. We've got a large heading. We've got some bolded text, paragraph text. We've got some headings here, of course, an image. Some bullet points are going to be part of this newsletter. And right down the bottom here, we have some links that we'll insert. So let's look at how we might add some of those elements to a HTML document. I'm going to tab over to my web browser here where I've got this code pen opened, and I'll give you a link to this code pen in Canvas, or I'll email it to you, and you can open up that code pen. And the first thing that you'll want to do once we're inside CodePen is make, obviously you have your own account and you're logged into that account, but from there you'll want to what they call fork this pen, and that means to create your own version, your own editable version of this code pen. We can do that fairly easily by coming down here to this little fork button. And while we're working through adding some HTML elements to this HTML document, I will talk you through a bit of how CodePen kind of works and some of the features of CodePen. First of all, let's fork this pen, okay? And that should create a brand new version of this pen, and that will be your own, and it'll be saved in your own dashboard, and you can give it your own name. I'm going to call mine demonstration, and I'm going to save it. Alright, so all the changes that I make in this CodePen will be saved to my own dashboard and my own version of this HTML document. So CodePen is an authoring environment. And what it kind of does is simulate that process of, on the right hand side, writing our code, and then on the left hand side, rendering it. Let me just close that ad. It does have ads. So on the right hand side, we're writing our code, and it could be different types of code. You can see here we've got a panel for HTML, CSS and JavaScript. We're only going to be looking at HTML today. And on the right hand side, it simulates what a browser does, and that is render the HTML from that text file. Let's open this up here and we'll just have a look at what I've provided you with. So I have put together some of the more complicated parts of this email newsletter. We'll look at building those in the coming weeks. We'll also look at styling our content in the coming weeks. Today we're focusing just on structuring the content and using some HTML tags and writing our first HTML tags. So I've already added quite a bit of HTML to this HTML document in advance for you, and I might just quickly step through what I have done there. I have added a HTML tag, all right, and you can see the HTML closing tag there. The HTML tag is the kind of main tag on a HTML document. It kind of houses everything else inside that. We've got a head tag up the top, which incorporates this metadata, which is the title. The title is what you see kind of at the top of your in your HTML tab. Not in this instance because we're using CodePen, but if this HTML was actually deployed on the internet, that's what you'd see in that tab there. Another important tag is our body tag, and our body tag incorporates all of the content that you see in the browser there on the right hand side. And then I've got some other tags here that I really will brush over at the moment. But I've got a main tag here, which is, I suppose, housing all of this content. A header tag, which is this green area here. And then I've put an image inside that that header tag, which is the logo there. Let's not worry about that too much at the moment. Let's look at this section here where we can add some of kind of the more basic tags, some of those typography tags, some of the tags that we looked at in that presentation, in those notes that you read through earlier. I'm going to quickly just dip back to my design and have a look at what I've actually designed. First thing that we can add is this main heading, a kind of a welcome greeting, and then we've got a paragraph of text. So let's add that stuff and see how we go. Now, this is what we call a comment tag, written with that exclamation mark, and that isn't rendered in the browser. So we can write ourselves notes like I've done here. Add your tags here. So this is where we're going to start writing our tags, put our first tags. So we looked at the main typography tags in those notes earlier, and they are heading tags and paragraph tags. We've got a cascading series of 6 heading tags, H1 all the way down to H6, and we've got our paragraph tag, which we write as a P. Let's get started, and you guys can follow along. Let's write a H1 tag like so. So this is the H1 opening tag, and I'm going to add my content in there, and I'll close off that tag. So my opening tag, H1, and my closing tag, H1, and inside there is my content, and we can see over here that it's rendered that heading. Let's add a paragraph. So we write our paragraph with the angle brackets enclosing the P, or the element name, and then we can add our content. And then when we close it, angle bracket, backslash, the element name, and then the other angle bracket, and we can see that it's rendered that content there. I might just add a comma in there. Alright, so if we want to make a carriage return, we'll need to add another paragraph. Oops. So I'm writing in our P tag, our opening P tag, and then we're going to add and then we'll close that off with a closing P tag. We can see that rendered there. So we've added a heading, we've added 2 paragraphs. I'm going to add another tag inside this paragraph here to bold this text out. And we can do that using the strong tag. So I'm going to write strong inside, oops, we'll need to add an R there. Spelling is really important when we're writing code. And we're going to add strong on the other side, and we can see now that that has encased that paragraph, or nested inside that paragraph, some bold text, dear customer. And then we've got our add some content later as our second paragraph. And you guys can add some more appropriate text in there to flesh out our page, if you like. One way of doing that, or something that I do a lot when I'm building pages out, is I use something like a blind text generator. blindtextgenerator.com, where I can grab some dummy text or some Laura Ipsum text to add into my code as I'm going, to make it kind of look a bit more real world. I'm not going to worry about doing that today in this demonstration. We'll tab over to the design and see what else we've got here. Now we want to add in an image. Okay, we add images by using the image tag. Like so. Now, the image tag is one of the only tags that does not have a closing tag. Everything kind of happens within the tag itself. At the moment, I've got an image tag in there, but I don't actually specify which image I want to put in that position. And I do that by adding an attribute to the tag. And you might have seen this in the notes that we went through earlier on. And the attribute that we add to specify the image that we're going to include in here is the source attribute, and it's written src equals, and then in these quote marks we put a URL to an image that we want to render in that position. So the URL that we use could be a relative URL, or it could be an absolute URL. An absolute URL refers to an image that is housed within the same folder structure or directory structure as the HTML file itself. And an absolute URL is a URL that points to anywhere on the internet. So we can actually bring in images that are published on other websites. What we're going to do for images today is we're going to use a CodePen feature, which is to add an asset. So there's a lot of kind of shortcuts that CodePen can do for us, and one of those is to provide code for particular types of assets. So let's just click on that asset. I can't kind of do it because my screencasting software is in the way, but if I click on assets and scroll down to photos, we've got this little conduit into Unsplash images, and we can get the code for Unsplash images and use that in our markup. I'm going to look for something, I don't know, related. And I'm going to grab this image here to use in our newsletter. Let's pull down this little pull down tab, and I'm going to grab we can get a large image or a small image. I'm going to just grab the small image. If I click that, it's actually going to copy the whole tag that we need, so the whole element that we need to render that particular image into our HTML. So I'm going to close that down, come over to my code over here and paste, and you can see that it has added the image in there for me. It's added the source attribute as well, and then this absolute URL to the Unsplash website where that image is actually being served from. You can see that it's rendered that into my my email there. Now the alt attribute is another attribute that's kind of important in the image element. So we've got the image element, we've got the source attribute and the alt attribute, and in the alt attribute, in between these quote marks here, you give a description of what that image is. So whatever is required. And that is a kind of an accessibility feature that allows people who use screen readers that are kind of visually impaired to get an understanding of what's in that visual if they kind of can't see it. So important to include the alt attribute. Okay, so we've got H1, we've got two different types of paragraph there, and we're going to add some further hierarchy in terms of headings. So we've got a different kind of heading, a subheading here. We've got another paragraph of text, and we've got some bullet points that we're going to add. Let's get into that and do that pretty quickly. HTML kind of generally stacks on top of each other, so we're writing our elements one on top of the other here. So let's add in a H2. We'll just write some content. There's our H2 heading. Let's see how it renders. Now you'll notice that as I'm putting this together, as I'm adding these tags, it is actually adding the content in a particular style. And I might just point out that that style is created by using CSS, which is another text file that we'll look at writing maybe next week. That is in here. So these are the actual style rules that I've written. But let's not worry about that right now. Let's just add the content, add the HTML elements, and learn about incorporating HTML elements into our HTML documents, and doing that inside the CodePen environment. So we added that H2. Let's add another paragraph just for the hell of it. And close that off. Alright, so we've got a heading and another paragraph. Some bullet points was something that was in the design. Let's add those bullet points now. We add bullet points with an element that's called a list. There's two types of list, an ordered list and an unordered list. An ordered list will give you kind of numbers at the front of your list, and an unordered list will give you bullet points. I'm going to create an unordered list, and I'll write that unordered list like this. So that's the unordered list element, but I haven't got any list items inside the list there. So I'm going to add some list items, and list items are written in exactly the same way for ordered and unordered lists, like this. Brackets, li, and then closing brackets, li, and then we can put some content in there. Let's have a look at that. So there's our bullet point. Let's just add one more to get the point. And close that off. So it doesn't matter if you make spelling mistakes inside your content, But it is really important not to make spelling mistakes in your tags or in your kind of HTML. Generally, we find if there's something broken in your HTML or your HTML is not working, it's usually a spelling mistake or a typo. All right, so paragraph and some bullet points. What else have we got in there? So we've finished out this email with some more paragraphs, another H2 tag, some more paragraphs, and then a paragraph that's with a strong tag nested inside it. Down the bottom here are some links, and links are, as we've discovered, what kind of holds the internet together, what creates that web, which is the World Wide Web. And the tag that we use to create a link is called the anchor tag. So let's create some anchor tags down in this bottom part of the design. So we're going to just go back over into our HTML here, and we're going to move down into another section, into this footer tag, which is down below here, underneath that section, and we can add some more HTML in this spot here. Let's add an anchor tag. We write an anchor tag like this, angle bracket A, and then the attribute of href. So it's, I suppose that, I don't know exactly what that refers to, but I'm assuming it is HTML reference. And it's another URL. And so it's a URL generally to a HTML file. So in here I'm going to put a website. I'm just making up this website, doesn't really exist. naturalskincare.com.au. Alright, so that's the link. That's where that link is going to go to. But we need some content inside there. Maybe it's visit our homepage. And then we close up that anchor tag like so. Let me just pull that out so we can see it written all in one line. We've got the opening the anchor tag, we've got the attribute of the anchor tag, alright, and we've got the content inside that element, and then we close that element up with the closing anchor tag. And let's have a look at kind of how I've rendered that. And you can see that that's an anchor tag or a link, because when I roll over it, my cursor actually changes to a little hand, and that's the browser recognizing that this is a link to another HTML page on the internet. Okay, so you guys can flesh that out a little bit more. I'd like you to have a play around with adding another H2 tag and maybe some more paragraphs, and you could maybe think about adding another link down there in the footer, and potentially playing around with your unordered lists as well.